I'm pretty sure that everybody in one point of their life had a fantasy about entering into the TV and interacting with the characters on screen. I know I have. I mean, who wouldn't want to fight alongside the Power Rangers or go on adventures on the USS Enterprise? But given the types of dangers those characters go through on a daily basis, it's probably for the best that we don't live in those kinds of worlds. But that being said, it is still an interesting concept. In fact, it is such an interesting concept that it's been used as the basis of TV shows and movies. But there is one film that takes that concept and dials it up to 11. The 1992 film Stay Tuned. This is one of my favorite movies, and it's a shame not many people are talking about it. The movie got mixed reviews on release and didn't do well in the box office, so it's understandable why a lot of people don't even remember it. So I'm going to tell you why I think this film is underrated. The film is about Roy Nabel, played by John Ritter, a father who likes to spend his free time watching TV, much to the annoyance of his wife Helen, played by Mork and Mindy star Pam Dauber. One day, Roy is visited by a mysterious and overenthusiastic salesman played by Jeffrey Jones, who wants to sell him a new TV and cable subscription with 666 channels. At first, he's hesitant, but after learning that there is a free trial, he decides to go for it, which of course makes Helen angry. So angry that she decides to leave him. However, during an argument, the cable dish turns to face them and shoots a beam of light that sucks them into the dish. And the next thing they know, they find themselves inside the TV. But something isn't right, because every TV show they come across is actively trying to kill them. So the race is on as they go through this gauntlet of televised terrors as they try to find a way to escape this hell. And I mean that quite literally, because despite me talking about this on the Sci-Fi Station, this has nothing to do with aliens, government conspiracies, or even time travel, but instead, demons from hell. However, I feel like there is enough sci-fi elements to justify me talking about it here. Anyway, with a concept like that, one would expect nothing more than pure entertaining chaos. And that is exactly what we get. From a wrestling match hosted by Super Mario himself, Captain Lou Albano, a talk show starring zombie versions of Wayne and Garth, to probably the biggest highlight of the movie, a Tom and Jerry style cartoon animated by Chuck Jones. I mean, look at it. This scene alone makes the entire film worth watching. And if that wasn't enough, there are also tons of fake commercials like UHF, advertising parody shows with a dark twist to them. Now, it's not perfect. I mean, the concept itself is probably way too good, so of course there might be a few missed opportunities, but it is still entertaining. I heard the film was supposed to be directed by Tim Burton, who turned it down to work on Batman Returns. So instead, they got Peter Hyams, who directed the sequel to 2001: A Space Odyssey, Running Scared, The Presidio, and would later direct Time Cop. Part of me does wonder what Tim Burton could have done with this concept. Peter Hyams did a pretty good job. Every single channel has its own flavor to it. The tone, the camera work, the set pieces, the actors, everything works well together and it feels like you are actually flipping through different channels. Now, an interesting concept doesn't really mean anything if you don't have likable characters to root for. And honestly, this is a pretty good cast. John Ritter was a great actor that sadly left this world too soon. And while I don't think it's his best performance, he does bring enough charm and likability to the character. Roy's a man who's tired of his normal life, finding it boring and overstressful, so he tries to escape that life by watching TV. Which is honestly pretty relatable. This leads to a pretty decent character arc where he becomes more outgoing and more willing to take risks. And while John Ritter's performance is good, a lot of praise has to go to Pam Dauber. When she was on Mork and Mindy, she was mostly taking a backseat to Robin Williams' antics. And it's always great to see her in a role that shows off her acting talents. She honestly has some of the most emotional scenes in the entire movie, starting out as someone who is trying desperately to save her dying marriage, upset that her husband that was once full of life is now spending his life watching TV, getting increasingly mad when he keeps ignoring her, with the last straw being when he gets a new TV, and all that happens in the beginning of the movie. And then when they get inside the TV, she really gets a chance to shine. Where one could argue that Roy deserves getting trapped in the TV because of how he acted, Helen is framed as more of a victim, frustrated and confused on why she's even in this situation. There's a great scene in the animated segment where she starts to emotionally break down, desperately trying to remind herself that she is not a character in a TV show, she is a normal person with a normal life. And while Roy and Abel continue to work together as the film progresses, they grow closer and have a better appreciation toward each other. Now it's time to talk about our villain, the salesman, who is actually the head of this entire operation. However, he is not the devil. In fact, the devil isn't even seen in the movie. And let me just get this out of the way, I am aware of the controversy surrounding Jeffrey Jones, and I do not condone any of his actions. But I'm the kind of person who judges performances and not the baggage certain actors have, and honestly, I kinda like this performance. I always appreciate the villains that you just love to hate, and this is definitely on that list. He comes across as the person who really likes his job, mostly because he enjoys watching the victims try to escape these demonic channels, becoming more and more over the top as they continue to survive. And there is a reason why he's trapping people in TVs, but I'm not going to spoil it here. There is also a subplot involving the Nabel's kids, Daryl and Diane, played by David Tom and Heather McComb. Daryl is a bit of a mechanical genius and uses his knowledge to hijack TV signals, while Diane is pretty much your stereotypical teenager, and both of them don't really get along that well. Diane sees her parents' sudden disappearance as an opportunity to throw a party, while Daryl is actively curious about what's going on and is the first to discover the truth, but is struggling to get his sister to believe him. I have mixed feelings about this subplot. On one hand, there are some interesting ideas to it, and Daryl is a decent character, which is more than I can say about the sister, who, as I said, is too cliche and stereotypical. Get it, this is meant to mirror the relationship and character arcs of Roy and Helen, starting out as not really getting eye to eye, but starting to work together as the film progresses. And while Daryl does convince Diane about what's going on with their parents, it happens about 2/3 into the movie. And I do like the scenes where they work together, but I feel like it would have been interesting if it happened earlier in the movie. There is one more character I would like to talk about, and that is a demon played by Eugene Levy, who loves to hear himself talk, much to the irritation of his boss. But once he starts talking about his boss's mistakes, he gets a one-way ticket to the TV channels, where he meets up with the Nabels and decides to help them. This is another element that could have been expanded upon. You would expect someone who has it out for the boss would help them as much as they can, but he only has like a few scenes in the movie, which is a shame because he is actually a pretty fun character. There is one more thing I'd like to talk about, and that is the climax. So if you don't want any spoilers, I'll leave a timer at the bottom of the video, because I think the climax is the most disappointing thing in this movie. And that's a shame because it actually starts out pretty good. Helen has been kidnapped by the boss and is tied to a train, but luckily Pam Dauber is still bringing her A-game with this. Meanwhile, Roy, with the help of a remote that allows him to switch channels, faces off against the boss, leading to a pretty entertaining cat and mouse chase with Roy and the boss switching through different channels. And they even throw in a Three's Company reference, which is pretty funny. I honestly would have preferred if the entire climax was like this, but we instead stop at a Three Musketeer style sword fight, which makes sense due to the foreshadowing from the beginning of the movie. And the sword fight itself is pretty entertaining, if a bit brief, because they switch to one more channel and end up in a music video featuring Salt and Pepper. And at first I'm thinking, okay, so we're still going through different channels, right? Nope, this is where he defeats the villain. And instead of just continuing their sword fight while the music video plays, they resort to awkward dance moves as they chase after the remote. That's it. That's what the build-up's been leading to. A freaking music video. This segment belongs somewhere in the beginning of the movie, or at the very least at the beginning of the climax, not the place of the final confrontation. Now, to be fair, the segment itself isn't terrible, and there are a few funny moments, like when a backup dancer finds the remote and accidentally mutes the video. But it feels like the film deserves something much better. But don't get me wrong, it is a fun ride getting here, and it makes me appreciate the journey more than a destination, kind of like the film explores. In the end, I feel like Stay Tuned is a very underrated movie. While it's not perfect, and there are plenty of elements that could have been improved upon, it makes up for it with an interesting concept, a solid cast, and a good sense of fun. It's a shame this concept isn't really explored that much anymore, probably due to the advent of video game tie-ins. Now it's possible to interact with your favorite characters and explore your favorite worlds. But I still think it's a concept worth exploring, and this film is a great example of that, giving us a fun movie with a good message on unplugging your devices, which can be pretty hard to do because how else are you gonna watch this movie? Anyway, this has been the Redshirt Reviewer reporting from the Sci-Fi Station. Thanks for watching. Don't you just love cereal that doesn't know if it has calcium in it?